It's great to be back here in Itamar Sfari, Parashat Vaerah. And I'd like to, something just came to mind, like what we call in Hebrew, havraka, like a spark of light from above. And I began to see a parallel between the plagues in Egypt to what Yosef HaTzadik went through. And I'm saying to myself, what does this mean? What are the implications of this? Why is this the case? And it seems to be so, in my eyes, it's sort of sticking out very clearly, this insight. And I want to show you some examples. For example, the first plague is blood. And we all know when the brothers sold Yosef down, so what do? They take the garment of Yosef and they dip it in blood. And after they slaughtered the goat, and they show it to the father, right? So first of all, the blood of Yosef is on the garment. It's like standing out, the plague of blood. And when Jacob's reaction, Yaakov, what does he say? Chaya ra'a chalatu. He talks about a wild animal that ate him up. And we know one of the plagues also is called arov. What is arov? And Rashi says right out. I'd like to read that Rashi. Rashi says regarding the arov, he says like this. What is arov? What is the plague of arov? Kol minei chayot ra'ot, all kinds of wild animals. Unichashim v'akarbim, and snakes and scorpions. Now we all know when it says Joseph was thrown into the pit, it says haborek ein bo mayim. It says the pit is empty, there's no water in the pit. And the Talmud in the Tractate of Shabbat says, why does the Torah have to stress there's no water? Because water wasn't in the pit, but what was in the pit? Snakes and scorpions. So these are the arov, the wild animals and the beasts that were sent towards the Egyptians. That's very interesting. Now, I just skipped over a second Sfaldea, right? Frogs. How does the frogs connect to Yosef? That's a difficult one. And I thought of the fact is that what does a frog do? And the frog, we all know, this is brought down in Midrash. The frog is something that they have they ribbit, they're screaming out all the time. And here it was like Yosef's, his cries weren't heard. And the frog is coming to symbolize the cries of all those, the cruelty that's being to somebody, and people giving a cold shoulder, not listening to the cries of those in difficult situations. And Yosef, of course, inside the pit of this pit, where there are snakes and scorpions, and is crying out for help, and no one's coming to his aid. So that is sort of as a connection to the Tzfaldea. But we spoke about the blood, we spoke about the frogs now, we spoke about arov. Now what about kinim, the lice? Now that's also very interesting, because if we pay attention, the word kinam, here's used, the word is kinam, right? In the Hebrew word for lice or fleas, whatever it was that this plagued the Egyptians. How is that connected to Joseph? Well, when the brothers come, when the brothers come to buy food, when there's a famine in Israel, and Jacob sends the brothers, so what do they say in the verse? They say, Kenim, anachnu. We are upright. We are telling the truth. When Joseph recognizes his brothers and he's they don't recognize him, so he's doing this whole show that he doesn't know who they are and all that, making like they're spies. So they're crying out and saying, "No, we're not spies." Kenim anachnu. Kenim sounds like kinim, right? The same exact spelling of the word. It's fascinating connection. So wow, there's a hint. Think about Yosef. Kenim anachnu. Now you're talking about that you're upright, but look what you did to your brother, right? So again, the plague of kinim seems to stand out of there, which I found fascinating. And the list goes on. We have to continue to the other plagues. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but each one has to be thought out. But we have, for example, dever, right? The plague of dever, which is plague, right? What is dever? I thought that word dever comes from to speech, dibur. And we all know Yosef, who represents the Brit, the Yisod, the foundation, right? So the Yisod, we all know, is connected to speech. It seems to be, how is that connected? It's a very deep Torah in itself. But to know that the Brit HaMa'or, the covenant of the Ma'or, which is our circumcision, is connected to the speech, to the Brit Milah. And therefore, milah itself, for the word in Hebrew, we talk about the word that is used to describe circumcision is called milah. Milah is speech. But there's a very, very, very deep connection between the two of them. And we're going to talk about that in a moment a little bit more. But so we see here also, so dever is hinting to dibur. Fascinating. That's another plague, right? Another one. And so dam tzvadei akinim we spoke about arov, dever. What about shchin? Shchin reminds us, shchin of the boils, but it also reminds us something very interesting about the language. Shchin comes from the shin chet, can mean shach, to be down, right? Shuach is a place like a little pit. It reminds us of the Joseph's pit, literally, the word shchin. I thought of that. Continuing, we also have, of course, to talk about albeh. Albeh are the locust, right? The locusts are something that in Hebrew, albeh means a lot. And Joseph, his whole name is Yosef, to add, right? Ben Porat Yosef is adding a lot regarding Yosef at Tzaddik. These are some hints, there are more hints. I mean, for example, going back to the blood, what does it say? What did the blood do? It killed the fish. It mentions, it stretches the fish inside the Nile were killed. Why does it stress the fish? Because Joseph, we all know, doesn't have the ayin hara, the evil eye doesn't come upon Joseph, and it's likened to fish, the dog. And here, the opposite, the fish died, which is really a very interesting connection in itself. And then we have, of course, darkness inside the pit where Joseph was thrown in. It was a dark place, totally dark. And makat becharot, the striking the firstborn, that is literally what they did. They struck the firstborn. Joseph was the firstborn of Rachel. And they struck Joseph. He was the firstborn over there. Now, again, I quickly ran through some of the parallels, which are fascinating. It's literally stands out there, right? And this just came to me also. I never thought about this in my life. And this came to me, boom. Why is it connected to Joseph? And then I thought of something interesting. Right before Joseph passes away, at the end of the book of Genesis, what does Joseph say to his brothers? He says, God is surely going to remember you. And then he makes them swear, "Valitim atzmotai," right? You shall take out my bones out of Egypt. And he's making sure that his brothers are going to do that, and they're going to take his bones out of Egypt. Later on, we know Moshe Rabbeinu actually sees to that happening by going to the Nile River and getting the bones of Moshe Rabbeinu out. Of Joseph. So we see that Joseph, the connection, the necessity of Joseph coming out of Egypt, even in bone form, but coming out something very deep about Yosef, that whole connection of leaving Egypt. So that's in itself it connects right away with the story of Yosef, of leaving Egypt, coming out. Now but still, how do we know? These plagues now were all plagues that were turned on the Egyptians, right? But I just showed you how in reality Joseph experienced them first. And what is the implication? What does that mean? And from here I want to mention, there's a very, very important understanding. It's brought down in different forms in the Talmud. And there's an expression I'd like to quote this, this particular Talmudic passage. And it says like this, it's brought down in the Midrash, it's brought down in the Gemara. It says like this. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, B'sha'a shenasa Shlomo et bat Paro. When King Solomon married the daughter of Paro, it says, Yerad Gavriel came down and he stuck, V'na'atz kaneh b'yam, and he stuck some kind of a peg, a reed inside the sea, Ve'elas sirton, and then like a sort of an island came up, Uvo nivna kerach gadol shebaromi, and that was a great city of the Romans was built on that. And what does that mean? Well, he's trying to teach us is that when Shlomo Amelech, King Solomon, did a sin by marrying the daughter of Paro, he connected himself with the Talmud, with the culture of Paro. So what happened was he now allowed a Roman city to be built. In other words, he allowed the evil forces of the world to lift up their heads and to be able to breathe and build a empire as a result of him sinning with the daughter of Paro by taking that culture into his home, the evil culture. So we learn from this concept is that when Israel is behaving like Paro. When we are behaving that way, so the opposite, that is really what bondage is all about. That's when we go to slavery, that's when we are punished, that's when we are thrown out of our land. When we are adopting the Paro culture in our lives. And that's really what happened when the brothers were treating Joseph the way they shouldn't have treated their brother. And they went and they gave all the 10 plagues Joseph went through. As I explained to you a moment ago, he went through all these 10 plagues. And that's what caused exile, because when he went from there, he was sold down to Egypt. Then the brothers came down to Egypt. That's really what all the bondage was all about, to have to rectify and cleanse all those terrible things, the way they behaved to the brother. And which is fascinating when you think about it. Now, when these things were rectified, our leaving Egypt was literally a rectification. And we know when it was rectified is when Hashem turned around and placed all these things on the Egyptians, all these plagues on the Egyptians. In other words, the bad qualities of the different tribes that came down to Egypt, because again, what they sold their brother. That was when we saw the rectification by it be turning against the Egyptians. Now God was hearing the cries, and God now was redeeming Israel. Right? So it's interesting how deep-rooted it is when we are behaving in a certain way and we adopt cultures, foreign cultures in our lives, how it causes us, it brings all the bad things, upon the nation. And that's really what the Talmud is saying. There's also another expression I'd like to bring down also, and brought down in Megillah. It says like this, in the tractate of Megillah, the Gemara says, Kesari v'Yerushalayim, right? There are two places. One is the great city of Caesarea, built by the Romans, in Jerusalem. Im yomar lecha adam, if a person says to you, Chavu shtehem, that both of them are destroyed, al tameh, don't believe him. Yeshvu shtehem, both of them are inhabited, don't believe them. Chalva Kesari, they said Caesarea is destroyed and Jerusalem is built. Chalva Yerushalayim, or the other way around, Jerusalem is destroyed and Caesarea is built, then believe them. In other words, what does this all mean? Is that Shneimar imal'ah hacharava. There's a verse in Ezekiel, brought down in chapter 26, chapter 26, Pasuk Bet, from Ezekiel the prophet. And there it talks about how Tzor, the Lebanese city of Tzor, was boasting but the fact that Jerusalem was under siege, and now they were going to become the city of trade, instead of Jerusalem. So God says, what's going to happen to you is your city is going to be destroyed. So we see that if one city is built on the other one's destruction. So it's a challenge. This concept, that's what the Talmud is really telling us. This concept of one city being built on the other city, it means that when Rome is being built, so Jerusalem is being destroyed. When Jerusalem is being built, Rome is being destroyed. Is that the process of redemption is that the nation of Israel in the world has a purpose. The purpose of creation of the world is to give, to bring Israel into the land, to give Torah to the land, to bring the light of Hashem to the world. And the culture, the true culture of the Torah has to shine in the world. But when Israel's not doing its job, when they're behaving like with the culture of the nations, so then they're bringing the plagues on the nation. Israel cannot fulfill its function. And the idea is to reverse that. And therefore, this concept is that when one is up, one is down. So that's the 10 plagues that plagued Paro now, because now Israel's going up, right? So Israel's going up. So now the plagues being turned on Paro, which will plague to Joseph. But the deep meaning inside here is that the result of their behavior to the brother like that, those were the qualities of the nations. Those qualities that shouldn't have been at all adopted by Israel, by the children, and what happened was a tragedy, the terrible tragedy that led to exile and the terrible suffering and all the things that went on. But the redemption, of course, is coming out. And that's really what the book of Shemot is all about. God created the world, and after creation now the book of Shemot, where it talks about how we're going to receive Torah. The purpose of creation is the covenant which is the Brit, the foundation of Joseph. On one side, right, the foundation has to be revealed, and then the covenant of the Torah. This is the powerful process of what is going on, from the beginning of creation. And it's an important point to pay attention to, because in reality, we have to take this to where we are today. And when Israel behaves like the nations and adopts culture like the nations, it's not going to bring us a blessing. But when we begin to reveal our true essence, who we are as a nation of Israel, and boast in be happy in our lot, in our culture of the Torah, and to be proud of our Torah, and not go off into to profane the Torah, to go against the Torah. So that will bring us the blessing and redemption. That's really what we're working for. And when people try to be like the nations, right, in Israel, unfortunately, and this brings upon Israel, God forbid, plagues and all kinds of trouble. So the situation that we've been experiencing in Israel has come from culture that we have to rectify. There's something, it's a deep teaching. We have to understand this. And when we begin to reveal who we are, and we live the reason of creation, of the Torah in the world, and the covenant of Yosef Tzaddik, we will bring a tremendous blessing upon the nation of Israel, which will bless the world, light to the nations. But when things are reversed, and all the things go haywire and are totally out of whack. So anyway, this is a little enlightenment, I felt enlightened from the concept itself. It's a lot to think about. But I want to wish you all a beautiful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom, Besorot Tovot, Yeshuot and Nechamot.